don't we get started? I want to thank everybody. This is a wonderful turnout. I know everybody's busy and there's a lot going on, and I want to thank everybody for coming and for making this event happen. Just a few housekeeping matters. If people need a drink during the program or need to do something, they can feel free to quietly stand up. There's restrooms around the corner, right outside the door, and so the program will probably go about 45 minutes or so with Q&A at the end. There'll be a reception afterwards. There'll be more food, so please stay and join us after the talk is over. Just a couple upcoming events. I think many of you have seen it, thanks to Hal and some other emails, but there'll be an AIPLA event tomorrow at the Stone's Throw restaurant. It's a very nice reception. It's a really open-air restaurant, and they do a really nice job for us. And at 5 o'clock till about 7:30 or 8 o'clock tomorrow. There's also two other upcoming events. There's flyers out on the table. You should take them as you go. But there's going to be a program on November 15th, on Friday, where the Law Review Symposium, the GW Law Review Symposium, they do a symposium every year. And last year they did it on voting rights with Spencer Overton. And this year they're doing it on patent law in Section 101. And what they do is they bring in both scholars and professionals that will talk about different issues, and there's going to be no surprise, issues about patentable eligibility, software, and hard science, biotechnology. And some of the speakers include Mark Lemley, John Golden, Don Dunner, Jeff Cushion. And so if you'd like to attend, I think you'd enjoy it. It should be a very good event. Charles Davis is our former editor-in-chief of the Law Review. Charles, you want to stand?
I'm back here.
He is a patent student, PhD, and it's amazing how many people on our Law Review are patent focused. Charles is going to go work for Covington and then clerk at the Federal Circuit and then go clerk at the DC Circuit over the next few years. And he was the one that helped come up with this idea, so I want to thank him. And just as a plug for next year, Bill Kovacic, I saw just the symposium next year is going to be on the 100th anniversary of the FTC. And so that will be a pretty interesting event to look forward to as well. The third event I just want to mention is the December 11th event on China IP. We've done this now the last 2 or 3 years with Mark Cohn, and we'll be doing that a half day, full half day, probably noon to about 5:30 on December 11th. And we'll talk about some of the China IP issues, mainly patent prosecution, patent litigation, and trade secret. So I also want to thank, since I won't have a chance at the end necessarily to thank everybody, there's several people that made this happen. And in just to give you some perspective, this morning I actually woke up in Seoul, Korea. And I was there for a week at the Joint Judicial Conference with the Federal Circuit, and Judges Rader and Reyna and O'Malley and Prost, with 750 attendees. And so you'd say, well, how did you get up in Seoul, Korea and show up here? It's kind of cool. Planes are fast and time zones work. And how could you put on a program like this? And there's several people that were doing this all week, and I was really just watching emails. And in no particular order, Mike Collins, Cassandra Crawford, the Cristelio Garcia, my new assistant, Kristen Palmieri, have all been very, very helpful in making this happen, so I want to thank them a lot. On the Korea point, I just got back from Korea. The court has gone to Japan, China, and Korea, and it has been very impressive, and I've got to be a part of it, and it was really a wonderful event. And if you haven't been to Seoul, Korea, I encourage you to go. I had never been, and it was very, very enlightening to me, just the cultural alliance between the United States and Korea, and it was really an enjoyable event. And I was thinking on the plane ride home, I know the topic of Horacio's talk is on software, and I was thinking of how much software was running the plane I was flying on, or the cell phone I was using, or the smartphone I was using to make all this happen from a distance. And I'm glad that technology was there, or this would not have happened. This is the A. Sidney Katz lecture. I know many of you know who Sidney Katz was, and for those of you that don't, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about him. He was a graduate of the school. He was a patent examiner, went to school part-time, graduated, went to Chicago. What do you do after a couple years out of law school? Start your own firm. And that's what he did. He built a big firm and then really became a presence in Chicago and was a really good friend of this school. And he died a year ago, and it's sad. But he made a difference on me. He was one of the persons I got to know the most when I was here. And he was always here. And I think I'll have a toast to him afterwards during the reception, and I'll do that in a little bit. But he endowed this, he was generous to the school in many ways in his time and in his generosity, and he endowed this lecture series that will go on in perpetuity because of him. It has had speakers, typically 2 a year, Judge Rader, Judge Plager, Judge Laurie, David Kapos, and several others, including 2 in the room. Don Dunner has given a lecture, and Terry Ray, who's in the audience, the Deputy Director of the USPTO. And I saw Terry yesterday in Seoul, and she was leaving, and I said, well, do you want to come tomorrow? And she says, I'm going to be jet lagged, and I said, it's going to be a good event, and so I want to thank her, because she's probably hitting the wall right about now. You can see the Diet Coke she's drinking next to her. So I now get to introduce Horacio Gutierrez. Horacio, his bio's outside, and so I'll just summarize, is the Corporate Vice President, Deputy General Counsel at Microsoft. And what I like to refer to it as, he's basically their top intellectual property general counsel person. He runs their entire group from prosecution, including patents, copyrights, and trademarks, to policy, to privacy, to conformance, to standards, and alike. He's on several boards, including our advisory board. He's on the Harvard University Board of Overseers. He's on the Hispanic National Bar Association, which I'll talk about in a second. And he's on the Tsinghua University IP Center in Beijing. Horacio has more law degrees than most people in this room. He has 3. He started with his degree in Venezuela at the Universidad, my daughter who speaks Spanish is going to kill me, Castelaca Andre Bello School. Sorry. She's going to yell at me. Nobody will tell her, except my wife's in the room too. He then came to the U.S. and got his LLM as a Fulbright scholar at Harvard. And then, after passing the bar and being able to practice, he decided to go back to law school and get his JD from the University of Miami. Horacio is really a world IP expert. He has served in positions as the top person in charge of Latin America IP and licensing, as the top person for Europe and Africa and the Middle East, I believe. He has lived in several countries, speaks, I think, 5 languages, and really comes at this with a perspective, not simply as somebody who has written patent applications or litigated them, but really as a bigger picture perspective, and I think you'll see that in his talk. Horacio and I met about 6 or 7 years ago, thanks to a mutual friend, David Jones, who's in the room, and we've stayed friends since. And Horacio and I really got to know each other during some of the patent reform discussion, when Horacio was one of the most influential and persuasive people during the patent reform debate. Now, how do I know that? I was fortunate to work in the Senate Judiciary Committee for just a year, but I worked with Susan Davies and Senator Leahy and Aaron Cooper. And there would be lots of meetings and lots of discussions. And if you think of the Senate policy discussion about patent law, and you compare it to like a Federal Circuit argument where there's 3 judges and 2 parties, during the Senate discussions, there was 100 judges. Picture 100 judges on a podium and about 50 parties. And how does anything get done? Who do they believe? And a lot of the people are talking about their own issues or their own businesses. But it was people like Horacio and a few others, but a very small group. They could be fit in probably a minivan that would really understand the perspective, not from their own company's bottom line, but from the system's bottom line. And it was those people that really could help broker discussions with cross industries, could help be objective, and really help be constructive through the process. And I know this because I sat in those meetings, and when everybody leaves those meetings, there's a discussion afterwards about, okay, what are we going to do? Who do we trust, and what do we believe? And he was extremely influential in that debate, and I think will be continuing to do so in the near future. The last thing I want to mention is he also gives a lot back of his time and his energy. And he and I have talked about, it was him talking to me about the underrepresentation of Hispanic Americans in the IP profession. And is there something we could do about that? We had talked about it a year or two. And then last spring, we're having lunch, and he's telling me he's got this idea, and he's actually implementing the idea. That's what, when Horacio has an idea, it actually gets done, usually very quickly. And they, with the Hispanic National Bar Association, the support of several law firms, and Judge Reyna, the Federal Circuit, they started a program that he may talk about in a few minutes that allowed Hispanic American IP students from around the country to apply to come to DC for a week. And 20 came. I think they had 90 applicants, and it was a screening process, and 20 came. And they were some of the most impressive students I had met. They were from all over the country, Stanford, Cardozo, Duke, schools I had not heard of as well. And they got to go to the White House, the Federal Circuit, the PTO, the Congress, and they were really very, very well received. And he was talking to me about it in the first few minutes of our discussion, and he said, you know, I got this idea, and they're coming to DC for the week. And I said, well, do you want to use the school? And he said, well, yeah, but I had a 20-minute pitch to give you, and then I was going to ask you to use the school. And I said, well, no, that's a great idea. And I don't know if we can let you use it, but I think we can. And then he said, well, I don't just want to use the classrooms. I need housing. And I said, well, that's above my pay grade, but I think they did give you housing at the end of the day. And I think this is going to continue for the next several years. And so it's just a show of how somebody's idea and somebody's commitment and then a little bit of working together can accomplish things, both on the policy side and on the altruism side. So it's really a privilege and a pleasure for me to introduce friends of GW and my friend Horacio Gutierrez.
After that introduction, I almost feel like I should stop here and not talk, because I feel like my image of me may be going downwards after you hear me. But thank you very much, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I want to thank John and Bob and Michael for hosting me and inviting me to be here, and all the work that Michael, you and the team have done to make this possible. This is a great pleasure for me to be here and talk about these things. And I've thought a lot about what is the right level of conversation that we ought to have in a setting like this. It's very easy, as you know, in the IP topic, to go way deep into a conversation one never comes out of, or very easy also to be so general that you end up with a conversation that really teaches you nothing. And how to strike that balance is a really hard thing. And we're having this conversation at a very interesting time also, a time in which there's a public debate and a public discourse that is very rare, in which assertions are being made about the health of the IP system that are very strong and very poignant. And we need to really try to bring some balance in the conversation to make sure that as we think about the task ahead, we're approaching it in the right way, and that we're moving the health of the system forward as opposed to creating more harm. So I thought I would talk about a number of things, and these are things that I get interested by and that I read about and think about a lot. I wanted to talk about the basic point that we all need to be reminded about when we start any inquiry into the function of the IP system and the patent system in particular, and that is the link between intellectual property and innovation, and between innovation and the economy. I want to have a little bit of historical perspective. We always, as humans, have the tendency to look at a situation and immediately believe that we are the first ones, surely, that are experiencing what we are experiencing. So some of these problems have never been seen before, and it actually doesn't take a long time to go back into the history of patent law and recognize the signs of some of the same debates that we are reliving today. And then I want to switch back perspectives and talk about it from the point of view of a business. And I think one of the perspectives that I can contribute is I can talk to you about the relationship that myself, but we at Microsoft as a business feel we have with IP. And it's a complicated relationship. It's a complex relationship. It's a love and hate relationship in many situations, but it's an important one. It's one that in the case of our company has really defined who we are as a company, and in some ways helped define an entire industry over the years. And I'll talk about the importance of IP to drive differentiation and choice for products in the marketplace. I'll try to provide some perspectives on what people talk about, refer to as the smartphone patent wars, and the history of it, and the drivers that may create the environment that we see today. Look about some of the scenarios of opportunistic litigation and litigation abuse that are really fueling a lot of the rhetoric that we hear when we listen to people talk about IP policy these days. And then offer a few thoughts in terms of what kind of debate is helpful to have at a time like this. You know, there is a whole range of perspectives on this point about the connection between IP and innovation, and there's a tremendous amount of cognitive dissonance. I look at some of the figures, and to me the figures are really speak for themselves. When you look at the fact that IP-intensive industries represent 38% of the total GDP of the country, and they represent 74% of the exports of the country, and that the software publishing industry is the #1 exporter of IP-based products around the world. When you look at the 55 million jobs that are supported by this IP-intensive industries, when you look at the environment that it creates, and that has created this magic formula of innovation where startups continue to come out, even in the midst of the economic recession, the phenomenon of innovation and new business models and new products come out every day to the point where we as consumers expect that there will be something new every morning. There will be a new tool, there will be a new app, there will be a new interesting technological convergence scenario that we hadn't thought about before. That engine hasn't slowed down. That engine hasn't broken despite the economic troubles the nation has gone through. And even though it's a very competitive world with many nations vying for the lead position as the technology innovation center of the world, despite all those economic troubles and difficulties, the U.S. continues to rank #1 in technological competitiveness in the key studies that measure that. This is something that is important. When you look at the world and the competitive world and the free market economies of today and the free trade world, it is really the ability to maintain the leadership in the field of invention and innovation that can drive the economy forward. In a world in which we're not able to compete with lower wage economies from a manufacturing perspective, it is really important to protect the output of the intellectual capital that we create in this country and that our universities create. And we have something going for us there. And the question is, how can we maintain that formula that has been a formula for success and economic prosperity in this country? When we think of innovation, you can even simplify it down to an equation. I like to talk about innovation being really equal to the sum of IQ plus IP. That means the human talent that we're able to attract, that is the output of our universities, that is the students, the bright minds from all over the world that come to this country to study or that we can attract to our company and then put them to work in trying to solve really difficult technical problems. And then being able to protect the output of that talent so that we can use those in our products and build a business proposition, a business model that allows us to continue in business and then start again this virtuous cycle of innovation that really never ends. It is really the people and the R&D investments that we make, but then also the intellectual property system that rewards us for making those investments, which not always pay off. And in fact, in a vast majority of cases, many of those investments fail. But yet there are those few where actually you succeed, and those are the ones that keep the business moving forward. And this relationship of Microsoft with IP is not new. I like to say that it's almost in the DNA of the company. What you see there, and you're not going to be able to read that, that's a letter written in February of 1976 by a kid who had just turned 20 years old, Bill Gates, about a year before he had dropped out of Harvard. And he was writing this open letter that was published in the Homebrew Computer Club magazine, which is a computer hobbyist club in California. And Bill had heard that people in the Homebrew Computer Club were getting copies of the disc in which the Microsoft First product was being distributed. And he was getting all these letters with raving reviews, people really thanking him for the wonderful job that they've done. And he had noticed that these people who were writing to him had never bought the product and had never paid for it. And what he was saying in that letter is that as long as people regarded software as something that didn't merit recognition of intellectual property rights and merit compensation for, as long as people regarded that there was a difference between hardware, which was something for which you paid, and software, which was this intellectual set of programming instructions that came with it, then there was never going to be a healthy software industry, and there was never going to be high-quality software. He talks about how he and Paul Allen, who obviously did not draw a salary from Microsoft at the time. This is Microsoft, if you read the letter carefully, was still spelled, there was a hyphen between micro and soft at the time. They had just started this company. They were not drawing a salary, but they had hired their first paid employee, Monty Davido. And he was writing manuals, and he was debugging products and things like that. And he said, how do you expect us to be able to pay his salary and then to hire the next employee and the one after that if the perception with respect to software is that it doesn't deserve intellectual property protection? Mind you, at the time, the laws for software was kind of a sui generis thing. And it wasn't clear if copyright was protecting it, and patents yet couldn't protect, and there was this limbo there. And there wasn't a software industry as such. The big hardware manufacturers created the instructions and essentially threw a manual in for anyone who bought the hardware, and there was really no investment in improving it or maintaining it or creating applications to it. So I look at this letter from the point of view of Microsoft as almost an industry manifesto, something that said there is a world in which software itself can create an industry, in which there are incentives for people to create better and better software every time, and that will make the hobbyist happy, but not if you don't pay for the software that you buy. You know, fast forward all these years, Microsoft has a portfolio of over 70,000 patents and pending applications around the world. We invest over $10 billion a year in R&D. This is, if not the largest, one of the largest R&D budgets anywhere around the world in any industry, not only in the computer in the computer space. But that has always been an important relationship, the one we have with intellectual property. And you see it every day. You know, one of the examples that I talk about is sometimes you don't perceive where software is and what it is doing for us. You know, one of the products, a product we launched 3 or 4 years ago, it was a product that actually got the Guinness World Record because it was the fastest selling consumer electronic product, was the Kinect product. It was a camera and microphone array system that was designed to be connected to the Xbox gaming console, and that use these high-definition cameras to interpret body movements and gestures, attribute intent to them, and then have your body be the controller for the machine. So you didn't need a keyboard, you didn't need a mouse, you didn't need a wand like the Nintendo Wii would have to track your movements. It would look at you, and it would look at your movements, and it would interpret what you were trying to do with that movement and then translate it into instructions that the computer would implement. And obviously what people see when they get it out of the box is this piece of hardware that they plug into the console. And we have something like 500 patents reading on different aspects of that technology. But it isn't really in the hardware where the innovation is implemented. It's really the algorithms and the skeletal tracking models and all of that knowledge that's built into the device that makes it possible. We were talking before we started about, when people talk about software and whether it is a suspect class when it comes to IP protection. And my comment was, why should Boeing's fly-by-wire technology, which is powered by software, be deserving of less IP protection than the beer helmet that has a patent, or actually multiple patents associated with it? I've looked it up. There's more than one. There's no end to the innovation that can go into a beer helmet. Now, this notion of hardware to software is an important one. There are many things that we do today digitally in a way that is powered by software that used to be done through resistors and capacitors and vacuum tubes and all of those kinds of things. What you see there is ENIAC, which is the electronic numerical instruction and computer. It was one of the first general purpose computer. It was in the University of Pennsylvania. It was unveiled in 1947. It was commissioned by the Army basically to do ballistic calculations to try to figure out the trajectory of certain missiles. And the two people you see there are the programmers. And those are two of a team of 6 ladies whose job was to set up each calculation that the computer was going to make by physically connecting certain cables into certain places. It took days to set up the computer before it would make a calculation. Those 6 ladies, by the way, are now in the Women of Technology International Hall of Fame because of the contributions that they made. And I'm serious about this. Even the way you would program a computer was manual, right? And this is not the only example. In manufacturing, the manufacturing process and the tooling process has gone from literally a manual process to a computer-guided or implemented one. The assembly line has gone from a manual process to almost 100% robotic environment, which is really controlled by software. Communications, the switchboard operators, some of us are old enough to remember talking to an operator to make a call, is now run essentially in a server through software. And these are technologies that can not only do the same thing the hardware equivalents would do, they do it better at a higher quality, higher fidelity, more efficiency, and you could say even in a more environmentally conscious way. And then the question is, if from a societal perspective those inventions deserve patent protection when they were implemented in the analog world, why should they deserve less protection when they're implemented in the digital world? And that is really a question that one should never forget as one is having debates about how to treat software from an intellectual property perspective. And that doesn't end there. I mean, just look at the relationship we all have with our smartphone today or with our mobile devices. That sinking feeling when you've driven away from your house in the morning and you're 12 blocks away and you've already gotten to the highway, and then you realize you don't have the phone with you. And then all the images that brings into your head into what the day is going to look like if you don't have your phone with you. I mean, do I need to say more about the importance of that? It's not a phone anymore. There are phones in the place where you're going. There'll be ways of connecting with them. It's the way you record your life is a digital video camera. It's a high-definition digital camera. It's a music player. It's a video player. It's a browser. It's a document editor. It's an alarm clock. It's a calculator. It's your Facebook portal. It's all of those things in a single device. This device that fits in the palm of your hand has more processing power, more memory than the capsule of Apollo 11 had when it landed on the moon. All right? And you carry it in your pocket. And it is all of those things in a single device. And by the way, you can make calls with it. So, and you look at them, and you go to a store, and you have all these really smart kids that are trying to sell you things because they have different commissions. And for the most part, they look pretty much the same to one another. When you look at them off like that, and then you turn them on, and then you realize, well, there might be some difference. I'd like to think we're trying to do something different with the UI. We're trying to make it a little bit more unique. But the reality is differentiation in this space is the difference between being successful in the business world or not. The margins in this space are so thin. The pace of innovation is so fast. The competition is so fierce, including from these immense industrial conglomerates in Korea, by the way, where John was this morning when he woke up, or Beijing and all these places, that the ability to offer a differentiated perspective for the consumer is the difference between being successful or failing in the marketplace. And that's where intellectual property comes in. It's the ability to create differentiated experiences because you have a better camera, because you have the ability to tap and send, because you can speak to the phone and this nice woman replies to you and tells you where to go, sometimes in the middle of a lake, but but she'll speak back. She'll tell you what she thinks you need to do. Each and every one of us is trying to find that better mousetrap that is going to present a differentiated proposition. And intellectual property is really at the core of that. That is the means through which we can differentiate. This photo came up in a tech magazine a few years ago. And when it came up, nobody knew what this conversation was about. All they knew is that Steve Jobs and Eric Schmidt were having a latte at a Starbucks in Palo Alto. Nobody knew what the conversation was. And then the Walter Isaacson biography of Steve Jobs' life came out, and we actually could put some of the words to this conversation. And the conversation was about, the notion that Steve Jobs felt that a lot of the innovation that he had created in the iPhone had been taken away. And I don't put this here necessarily as a commentary on one particular company or the other. It is here to reflect how emotional it can be for someone who's trying to put his life or her life into creating this differentiated offering and feel that other people are copying it. So this is not just a business proposition. Sometimes it can even become a personal one, because people become attached to those kinds of issues. So it is not surprising that in a product as complex as a smartphone, that is all of the things that I said it was, that is really built on mountains of thousands of patents for innovations created by thousands of companies around the world over decades, from the cellular telecommunication standards to display technologies to memory technologies to battery technologies to camera technologies. It's built really on the shoulders of giants and this gargantuan investments in innovation over the years. It is really not a surprise that there would be disputes as to who owns what piece of a product of that kind. And then that's why you see this spaghetti bowl of litigation out there. Now, people look at this and they say, well, surely the patent system couldn't have been envisioned to work this way. I mean, you really don't mean to say that people are going to be suing each other over patents, right? So what do you mean? These are operating companies. Isn't the fact that they feel strongly enough about their innovation that they can sue and risk their own business in a litigation like that, isn't that a sign of health of the system, that people are using it the way the system was intended to be used? And yet, people who don't understand how the system works look at this and they say, this is evidence that the system is broken. Why? Because people are enforcing patents. They were not supposed to be enforced, right? No, they were. And the worst part of all of this is to live in a world in which you have some companies that don't have meritorious claims, that use the inefficiencies of the system to extract value that they don't deserve, and at the same time, companies that have meritorious claims and that sue to enforce their IP somehow cannot get a full remedy. If we live in that world, then we've achieved the worst of all possible the worst of all possible outcomes. And this notion about litigation, protracted litigation, is not new. The reality is every time there's been a disruptive technology that has caught on and achieved scale implementation across a market, there has been a spat of litigation. Some of the examples we have there is a sewing machine, Singer and Montgomery Ward. They were part of litigation for many, many years. There was a patent pool that was created around that. Singer himself created the Singer sewing machine on the basis of a patent that an NPE held. It was Elias Howe that actually licensed the technology to Singer. And the railroads, it was the Pullman cars and the air brakes that were using there. There was litigation around that. The telegraph, the famous O'Reilly versus Morse cases, made it all the way to the Supreme Court. Morse, like in Samuel Course, of the famed Morse code. The telephone cases, over a decade of litigation with Alexander Graham Bell and claims of fraud in the patent office and all these sordid political story behind it. The Wright brothers suing David Curtis for the use of the aileron as a way of controlling the flying machine. The Marconi cases and in radio. Every time there's been a disruptive technology that has changed the face of the market, there has been a spat of litigation that eventually has subsided by a combination of court decisions and licensing arrangements that basically settle the picture from an IP perspective, and then innovation can continue. Nowadays, you see that with mobile devices. The ubiquity that they have, the importance that they have in our lives, as we were talking about. It is really not surprising that these things are happening. Now, attention in the last few months have shifted from the smartphone patent wars and operating companies suing operating companies, and a lot of the discussion is about this patent troll problem. And people who watched the news conference this morning saw that has really become the theme of the conversation nowadays. And when I talk about these things, I want to be very careful. And we have this unique perspective in that we have at any one time something like 80 cases in our defensive patent litigation docket from non-practicing entities. And a lot of them are cases that we think shouldn't be there. They're people who are engaging in what I describe as opportunistic litigation behavior that are exploiting some of the weaknesses in the litigation system to try to extract value that they shouldn't extract. And that certainly is reprehensible behavior. And there are things one ought to do to close down or restrict or minimize the opportunities that those people have to extract value that they're not entitled to. But the reality is the notion of non-practicing entities has existed in the United States since the very creation of the patent system. And some of them, were very notorious and iconic ones. Thomas Edison, Nikola Tesla, Elias Howe. All of these people were inventors. And the fact that IP can be traded in the market, that can be contributed to a company, that can be sold, that can be licensed, I would argue is a big reason why we have the startup phenomenon that we have in this country and the level of accelerated innovation in technology that we see. So one needs to be careful when one talks about this. By the way, MIT and Stanford, NPEs still. So how are you going to treat them? So, and yet what you read is focused on this really abusive behavior by certain players in the market that have engaged in this behavior where they go after particularly the unsophisticated small companies, and in some cases making claims that are borderline fraudulent in terms of the value or the meaning of their IP, and then trying to extract nuisance value out of that. And you see all of this cases related to scan to email or the Wi-Fi cases, all of those were tens of thousands of demand letters and that are going out those people. So there is really something to be talked about and something to be done with respect to that. And we ought to take it seriously. Now, is this the first time that it is happening? Well, it turns out it isn't. And is it unique to information technology? Well, it actually turns out it isn't. You just have to go back to the 19th century and you will find the mass assertions that happened in the 1880s against dentists around the world, around the country, having to do with some of the bridge and filling technology that was used at the time. And the farm implements, the machinery and equipment, there was a rash of assertions in that space. So much so that created such an outrage in the farm industry around the country that it even fueled the Granger movement, a political movement of the time. Now, these things are not necessarily information technology. What they have in common is they were the technologies of the time that achieved scale. That you could find them across the market, and then you could find many, many users of that technology that were at the same time able to pay some compensation, but not sophisticated enough or well-resourced enough to fight back. So abuse of the patent system is also not a new phenomenon, and is not unique to software, and is not unique to anything. You will always find people who will try to take advantages of inefficiencies in the system, or the ambiguities, or the uncertainties, or the hold-up fear, or the unsophistication of the users of technology to try to take advantage of them. So the common equivalents are smartphones, or Wi-Fi, or scanners and emails in your computers. But there's nothing unique about the subject matter of those inventions. What they have in common is scale and widespread use, and the ability to make a quick buck from people that are not in a position to really fight back. So when one talks about reform, the word in my mind that I always want to convey is balance. One needs to understand that what you're talking about here is a very important system of incentives that not only has an implication for Microsoft or for a few companies in a few industries, it is really underpinning the way the whole economic model works in this country. We believe that the identified abusers, the behavior and the conduct of some of these players that are in fact engaging in abusive conduct should be focused on. And it's something, there are opportunities to deal directly with that bad conduct and bad behavior. We believe there are opportunities to address the economic model of this patent litigation model, which is a nuisance value litigation model that is there. And that unless you go to the heart of the business model in some cases, you're really not going to be able to change behavior, because they will be able to adapt and find other avenues to achieve the same thing. We believe that the PTO should be funded and given the resources that it needs in order to do the quality examination job that they need to do, so that bad patents don't come out of the system. And since, we users are the one who are paying it, and we gladly agree to have our fees increased by a significant margin so that the Patent Office has those resources to do it, now we demand that the Patent Office be allowed to use those resources in order to do the job that they need to do, to improve their systems, their IT system, to continue to hire, to train their examiners, to do the job they need to do to uphold the bar of quality that the office wants to deliver and that we want them to deliver. And also, very importantly, we urge people not to take the position that there are different kinds of technologies that deserve differential treatment, that there really isn't a difference between a societally valuable invention when it's implemented in software that all of a sudden loses all of its value when it's implemented in software. And that indeed, invention in software is critical to the success of this nation in the long term and to our economic prosperity in the future. And there's a group of people that feel the same way. Unfortunately, ours are not the voices that are always heard. The loudest people tend to be the people who speak on the extremes of the spectrum. They have a cleaner message, it's black and white, people understand it, reporters understand it, and it gets the point across very well. But IP and the relationship between innovation and economic prosperity and competitiveness and intellectual property is a nuanced one, and requires people that are going to look at the problem with a nuanced perspective and are going to have the interest of the system and the health of the system for the long term in their hearts, as opposed to a particular tactical advantage that they may be trying to gain from an outcome in the short term one way or the other. So, we'll continue to be part of this conversation alongside many others. Many of the people who feel this way are not people that you would consider to be software companies. Some of the people who feel the strongest about these things are the Boeings of the world and the General Electrics and the Procter & Gamble's of the world, and those companies who consider themselves software companies. And there are very much information technology companies in the way they conduct their business, in the way they manufacture, in the way they design. These are the people who are getting the overwhelming share of the computer implemented invention patents that are coming out of the patent office and patent offices around the world. And those are the stakeholders that should be part of the debate so that we can bring about a balanced outcome that is going to move the nation and the economy forward. Thank you. I think we have time for a few questions. Although, what is there to ask, right? Yes.
So, why do you think the attitude is the way it is now? And how do you change it? I mean, I understand the science, but why do you think it has gotten to this point? I mean, I have this whole attitude, people don't like paying for patents that they use. They're happy with the patent system, but they just don't want to pay for the ones that they need to pay for. That's part of it, I think. But how do you get them off this drumbeat that we see again and again and again, without talking about code, without talking about the gates?
Well, it's a good question that has a complicated answer. The first thing is, like in every good story, even if it's fiction, there's a kernel of truth. And so you actually start from the proposition that there are some people whose behavior is questionable and that are engaging in this opportunistic behavior to try to take advantage of other people. And that has tended to sort of dominate the public discourse, I would say certainly over the last 6 months or so. So we start with that proposition. And then what you also have is a little bit of cognitive bias. You have the companies whose only relationship with the IP system is as a defendant, and they're not necessarily in a business model in which innovation and protection of their innovation is key, or where differentiation is key, and therefore IP doesn't play such a prominent role. If you're in a commodity business,
arguably Microsoft that way 10 years ago or 15 years ago and evolved out of that a little bit.
No, I don't think we were. There might have been times in which we might have overreacted to the fact that we were getting sued by patent trolls left and right, and that our experience as a defendant would tend to influence our positions on policy more than it should have. But what I'm talking about here is that there's a difference in business model. If you're a retailer, or if you're an end user, and all your experience with IP is getting all these crazy letters from these crazy law firms that are telling you that you need to pay $5,000 here, $10,000 there, $500 per person there, here and the other, you can't blame them for looking at the problem and saying, this is broken, something ought to be done about it. And indeed, something has to be done to solve some parts of that problem. When you look at the corporate environment, then what you have to look really is at the business model proposition. It's a fascinating time right now. People make money in so many different ways. And there are some companies that make money by monetizing their innovations. Think of Apple or think of Procter & Gamble, of those. Every product they make comes with a perspective and comes with a differentiated proposition. And the way they make the money is by selling that product and then collecting the price. And then there are a number of companies that don't necessarily monetize those products. Think of business models like the razors and the razor blades and the razor, for example. You may give some things away because you're making money somewhere else. And you may be an advertising company. You may be like Google that has 90-something% of their revenue come from advertising as opposed from selling software or selling the technology. So your relationship with IP is going to be very different if your goal is to commoditize a class of products, and then IP is friction, is an obstacle that you better remove, than if you're a company that's trying to differentiate and have a proposition that's different from your competitor, in which case you want to protect and prevent other people from commoditizing you. So whether you are the commoditizer or the commoditized, you have a very different perspective of how IP works. So it really goes about business model. And then some people, just their experience is just colored by their experience in litigation. And in the history of Microsoft, there was one particular litigation in the beginning that really scarred many of our executives. We were not prepared at the time. We had not really considered the issue. We were not really paying attention. The law was in flux. It really hadn't developed the way it needed to. And then you learn. And then what happens is with time, with like everything, not only in this field, you become more experienced. You tend to understand it. You understand that a company like Microsoft needs a budget to deal with IP conflicts. That if you were in the nuclear power generation business, there'd be a line item in your budget to deal with atomic energy regulators. And that compliance would be a cost of doing business, right? If you're selling a highly complex piece of technology that builds on decades of innovation by hundreds of companies, you probably need to have a proactive licensing strategy to try to lower your cost, to trade through cross-licensing, in some cases to be able to compensate people for that. I mean, we've said publicly over the last decade, Microsoft has paid more than $4.5 billion in royalties to other people for the right to incorporate inventions into our products as a means of making sure that the people who buy our products are not going to be disrupted by the claims of third parties. So this relationship and understanding and mature and sophisticated and proactive approach to removing IP risk through licensing, through your own patent portfolio development, in litigation, both offensive and defensive in some cases, all those things are part of a sophisticated menu that people need to employ in order to be able to stay in business and do it successfully. Don?
Horacio, I know Microsoft has had a few trips up to the Federal Circuit, and recently the Chief Judge of the Seventh Circuit, Diane Wood, gave a keynote speech at the Chicago Kent School of Law where she said the exclusive jurisdiction of the Federal Circuit is terrible for the system, and she proposed having the Federal Circuit share jurisdiction over patent cases with the other 12 circuits, and parties can take their choice, either go to the Federal Circuit or another court. I don't know that you've given any thought to that, but...
You trying to get me in trouble, Don?
I'd be interested in your thoughts.
Well, look, I didn't hear the speech. I didn't read the speech. I think it's an interesting proposition. The debate between having a unified court versus not having it. I mean, some of that debate is happening now in Europe, and we're looking at it with a lot of interest and trying to weigh the pros and cons of that. What I would caution against is people taking a position on this, not so much on whether the notion of a unitary court is a good thing or a bad thing, but whether the decisions that are coming out, or a certain line of decisions that are coming out of a court, are something you agree or disagree with. I actually think that there are clear efficiencies that come out of the existence of a unitary appellate court when it comes to patents. And I actually think the Federal Circuit has done a lot since its creation that is positive. Do I agree with every decision the Federal Circuit Court issues? Of course not, especially the ones in which we lost. I vehemently disagree with them. And I can talk about some of those decisions today, in which I think the pendulum swings from one end of the spectrum to the other. But so does the pendulum swing in the Supreme Court. when you look in history. And sometimes we actually celebrate the Supreme Court because they force the pendulum to swing in one way or the other. So this is a complicated discussion. It's an interesting discussion. I think it's a healthy one. I would caution people jumping to a conclusion because they disagree with a decision or a line of cases in one direction or the other.
I understood you to advocate increasing the cost of obtaining a patent so that the patent office would have enough funds. What does that do to the young innovator, the independent innovator?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And by the way, I'm not advocating the cost be further increased. I think I did come out in support of the patent office when they announced, I think, the last couple of increases, because there was a recognition that the office needed to make investments in both its infrastructure and its people in order to really achieve the targets of quality that they were trying to achieve. And
I think it would be lovely if the patent office could simply keep all of the funds that were sent.
yeah, and the diversion of fees. I mean, the reality is, if it's not that, then they just increased our taxes, right? But your question is a really important one, which is, how about the little guy? And I would say that here's when you need to strike a balance. Because the little guy benefits from having a patent system that makes it affordable for them to protect their invention, but it also benefits from ensuring that the output of the patent office is high quality. And striking the balance between the two is a hard thing to do, but it's something that we need to strive to achieve, because, underinvestment in patent examination and prosecution could be as damaging to the small firm as excessive cost in procuring a patent. So striking that balance that's why the policymakers get paid the big bucks.
Here are food stamps.
Professor Albert.
Yeah, thanks. So you are an international company, and on many of these issues you mentioned with this nice spaghetti there, with international companies too. So my question is, the international dimension here, when it comes to patent enforcement, protection, and so on, how does that play out? And is there a need, in your view, for some sort of international concerted discussion or harmonization versus specialization in the patent system?
Wow, I mean, this is the night of the tough questions. And this is a conversation that has been going on for decades in terms of harmonization. And yeah, the question is, how about the perspective of the international perspective of the patent system, and are we in favor of further harmonization or uniformization of the processes?
Or competition.
Or competition between them, right? Well, I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to add anything awfully innovative on that, other than the fact that there is clearly an opportunity when it comes to processes and examination for there to be some work sharing and that would expedite the process of examination, and that would ensure a consistency in the quality of examination. And I know the PTO and the P5 and many other, there have been a number of efforts trying to do that in terms of sharing of prior art and sharing of examination data. Of course, the holy grail of this is to have a single patent that is enforceable everywhere. I think most of us recognize that is actually an unachievable goal, certainly in our lifetime. But there is opportunity for greater work sharing, greater efficiency, and therefore methods to manage the workload and reduce the backlog in many of the offices that would be very helpful. And we were the first ones to take advantage of the patent prosecution highway program in Japan. We had the first patent that came out of the program. I think we were the first ones to get a patent out of the PPH with Korea. And those things are I think, laudable initiatives that would help get there. Is there competition from that perspective? That's a very complicated question. I think certainly I would think SIPO in China would be very proud of the record in terms of the average pendency of a patent. I think other offices focus on other kinds of attributes of the output of the office. I know that China and India have very different perspectives when it comes to patents and how they deal with them. And to expect that there was going to be uniformity with respect to that, I don't think it's realistic.
So
Yeah.
here's a question about the abusive IP litigation thing. Do you think that is what's the weakest point in the U.S. patent system that caused the abusive IP litigation that needs to be fixed now?
It's like being a teacher and getting asked these questions.
I mean, it's just pick one out of 5 or 10 things that can kill you. I mean, there are a number of things. I mean, the reality is litigation is costly. The sequencing of litigation makes it so that you have to spend a lot of money before you even get to determine if the patent is worth anything. And that economic reality forces rational people to be willing to settle for a lower amount than the patent would be deserving, but it is a lot less than what you would have to spend if you went through even pre-trial and discovery, right? So I think looking at the way the litigation system is sequenced when it comes to patents could actually go a long way with respect to that. I think we are believers in fee shifting as a way of going to the heart of the business model. I think when it comes to some of these patent assertion entities, the fact that they look at patents as lottery tickets, and there really is no downside involved in asserting a bad quality patent, we don't think fee shifting would solve every problem, but it would impose a kind of self-discipline that would force self-selection of the patents that are brought into litigation, that would at least drive the bottom rungs of the patent quality spectrum out of the system. So there are a number of them. I think there's tremendous opportunity in the litigation front, if we do it right, to take away some of the uncertainty, the unpredictability of the system, which is what the abusive litigation trades on. So I would say those are the ones that are, to me, the most interesting. The least interesting ones are the ones that really try to deal with it from a 101 perspective, from a patentable subject matter eligibility. And there have been many tries at doing that, and it makes us all very nervous, and we think it's the wrong area of inquiry. So let me go to the next one.
First, thanks for taking the time to give this presentation. I think you just touched on an excellent point. With regards to litigation, I think it's a combination of opportunistic behavior and poor quality software patents. And so, what to do about the backlog of the poor quality software patents that are out there? They're usually the ones being used as weapons by trolls to assert against small tech startups, entrepreneurs, and app developers. So if you could touch on that, and maybe just kind of how they already have 2 re-examination programs, when those aren't applicable, maybe a recourse.
Yeah, I would say, I would start from the proposition that the computer science field doesn't have the monopoly on bad patents. There are bad patents in every field. And as I was trying to say during the presentation, to me, what you're seeing is the fact that information technology is so prevalent and is used by so many people that it just creates more opportunities for people to take advantage of that. I don't think you deal with quality issues in software patents differently than you deal with others. I think there are, I think there's opportunities in the margins, mostly in the way the administrative process is handled to increase quality, create some certainty through using glossaries and nomenclatures and defined terms in a way of making sure that the ambiguities around the contours of the claims are driven out of them. The only empirical evidence that I have with respect to this is actually a paper that was published by former PTO director Dave Kapos last year, in which he looked at software patents and the outcomes in litigation, and I think he actually didn't find that software patents were being invalidated at a higher rate than other patents, and in fact, if I remember this correctly, they were found to be invalid in some cases less than patents in other fields. So now we keep repeating these things over and over again. At some point we convince ourselves that there's an impending crisis that needs to be addressed and that justifies all these draconian things that we want to do with them. But I think it's important to have empirical support for those discussions. And patents that are weak and that shouldn't have been granted should be invalidated. And should be invalidated because you're using the post-grant review or the inter-parties review that came in the AIA, or because people are using Section 18 and the CBM, or invalidated in court. There's multiple opportunities to do that, more now than there has ever been in history of the patent system, both on the administrative and judicial level. So there's plenty of opportunity to do that. But the phenomenon of bad patents is not the monopoly of software, and is not going to be solved, because there will always be prior art that wasn't considered, or information that wasn't available about technologies used in certain products. You're really not going to know for sure. I'll take maybe one more.
Yeah, I'd like to ask a question. That as Microsoft is doing business world over, with the widespread, there is also an infringement with the patents. What are the measures which the Microsoft is taking to deal with the infringement issues?
When we look at our own products and the infringement of third-party patents,
yeah, what
measures do we take?
Yeah, what are the measures?
I'm going to need everyone to sign an NDA. I think we do a range of things, and I think if you asked IBM or Hewlett Packard or any large technology company, you would find that we're doing the same things they do. We are we're entering into license agreements. When we entered the enterprise software space, and we moved from being just this personal computer company to being a company that provides servers and software for servers, we knew we were entering into a market where there were a number of incumbents that had very strong patent positions. And they were the IBMs of the world, and Hewlett Packards, and Fujitsus, and Toshibas, and Siemens, and all those companies. And we did a number of things. We developed our own portfolio, and then we went out and proactively signed patent cross-licenses with the companies that held the top patent portfolios in the field. And in some cases we paid, in some cases was royalty-free cross-license, in some cases we got paid. But we went at it understanding that this was an issue that was going to be critical to our success, that we didn't want our customers to have to deal with the issue, and that as vendors of the platform, we wanted to stand behind the platform. And in order to do it, we needed to have something to trade, and then we actually needed to go and trade it in the context of cross-licenses. So our patent portfolio became almost like the currency that we used to effect those trades with others. And you're not going to catch every one of them. And in many cases, there will be patents that you don't think are meritorious. And then in those cases, you deal with the situation as it presents itself. But it's a multi-pronged tool, set of tools that one uses, and every situation is different. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I want to thank you for a fascinating, historically rich, insightful, passionately delivered talk. I think if Sid Katz were sitting here, he'd be beaming with approval. Everyone, please stay for the reception afterwards. I see that there's new food that's been placed out here for your eating pleasure, and lots of great people in the room to talk with. Let me just mention very briefly 2 other upcoming IP events in November. On Wednesday, November 20th, Maria Palante, Register of Copyrights, will deliver the Meyer Lecture. The next day, on Thursday, November 21st, the Director General of WIPO, Francis Gurry, will be here to give a talk. And so for those of you who are interested, come back for those as well. So thanks very much. Thank you. Thanks again.